In this talk, I will share my thoughts on how to find ideas that will create large impact in the world. Here are some possible reasons why we're here today, right? So we want to win this competition, which is great. Many of you are very ambitious, and competitions are a great way to motivate yourself to excel. That's great. We want to learn a lot, so that could be another reason why we're here today, right? All of us as human beings, we like to learn things. We like to make progress for ourselves and for those around us, which is wonderful. And that could be one of the reasons why we're here today. We want to do a lot of things. So this is not my favorite thing to do. I don't want to do a lot of things. It sounds tiring. Um, but maybe some of us like to do a lot of work, like to do a lot of things, and maybe we're already working on 10 things, and we want this to be our 11th thing, right? That could be a reason for some of us to be here. I mean, that's fine. I respect that. Um, but I think many of us, and probably all of us, are really motivated by creating a large impact, and I think that's primarily why we are here. And even if you didn't really think about why you are here in this particular and in this exact phrase, if you really ask yourself, I believe this is why you're here. It's not just for this competition. It's not just because you like to learn a lot or a little. It's not because you want to do a lot of things. It's really what you're really trying to do is create an impact in the world where you live in. I actually looked at many of the videos you shared with the program, and I was really inspired by it. And I think all of us wanted to create, some type of impact, some large impact in the world we live in, and that's why we're here. And we should never forget that it's an entirely different story if we're able to create that impact or not. But our heart is in the right place, and that's why we're here. So that's the frame of mind we should always be in this program or outside. And I was very inspired to actually see that in the videos that you created and shared with us. Thank you very much for that. Um, so today, with that framing, really wanted to share some things that have worked well uh, for me and for my students. And in the classes that I've taught, what I've shared with many other people, and some of these ideas might also work for you. And even if they don't work, it's worth considering. Okay, now how do people approach, let's say, generating ideas, creating ideas, and how do people approach evaluating the ideas? And I have a few thoughts, very few thoughts, on how we should be thinking about skills to be successful in this program and beyond. So that's kind of what I want to cover today. um, Ideas, topics, projects, whatever it is that we want to do. It really starts with some kernel of idea, and you build on it. And you had to write some statements for the program. And if you're applying to colleges, pretty much anywhere in the world now, they will ask you to write about some things that you care about or what you want to do in college. If you interview for a job, they will ask you, okay, what are you really interested in? Give me one idea that's interesting. And many of us are interested in, creating startups or doing some new projects, in the government, non-government organization, or commercial sector. A lot of these activities start with ideas. So we need to uh, think about how to create ideas and also practice some of that, right? So I'm going to give you some ideas here on how to create ideas, how people create ideas that may be useful for you. There is no guarantee this will be useful for you, but it's worth looking at what works for some other people, right? Um, let's start with this question. Should we work on new ideas? Right? And the reason why this question is important is a lot of us when we think about ideas, we say, okay, let's try to come up with new ideas. And it's very tempting, and it's a worthwhile thing to do, create new ideas, right? We want to move the world in new directions, right? That's what we want to do. And that typically might start with new ideas. So this is a very reasonable first question to ask, right? Whenever we're trying to create ideas, but we should not get too caught up in this idea. That's sort of the point I'm trying to make, because not all the ideas have to be new, right? Because newness of idea is not what motivates us. Just remember the first few slides I shared with you. You know, it should not be our goal to do something new. It should be our goal to do something impactful. So that's what we need to think about. It's very easy to get carried away about the newness of ideas, but that's the wrong focus. Newness doesn't matter. You don't have to do something new. What you want to do is something useful. I think that's something that we should really keep in mind always, whenever we make decisions in our lives, right? Saying, okay, should I do a new job or an old job? That's the wrong question, right? Should I do a new project or an old project? Newness does not matter by itself. That should not be our primary criteria. Doing something new should not be a primary objective. So that's sort of the point I want to make. And also from a practical perspective, you can try really, really hard. And believe me, I have tried very, very hard always to come up with new ideas. But the reality is most ideas may not be new. It just may not be new because there are billions of us in the world, basically billions of brain working. And it's really hard to come up with something that's fundamentally new. And sometimes new may be subjective, and sometimes newness may just be the context. So I think it's a good question to ask. Okay, are there some new ideas in this space? I think it's a good question to ask, but don't get too caught up in that question. Don't get too carried away by that question. The right question is, what is the most important thing to do in this area, not what is new. So that's something to keep in mind when you formulate ideas for this program and beyond. Here are some tools that have kind of worked for me, for many people. And I've talked to many people about, okay, how do you create ideas? How do you how do you come up with a list of ideas if you have that system in place? And turns out a lot of us do. I mean, this is not an exclusive list, right? This is not a complete list, but it turns out these three heuristics actually cover, pretty much all the ways in which we come up with new ideas. For example, we combine existing ideas to create new ideas or slightly different ideas, or we modify an existing idea, or simply we take idea from one place and apply it in another, right? So let's look at this in a little bit more detail. Here's an idea of how we may combine ideas, or even if we have an idea, it may have been inspired by a combination of ideas. There were, I think, at least two videos that I watched, very interesting, and I appreciate all of you sharing, what you think is really important, where you live, right? Reporting potholes. Potholes are a big problem in the United States also, right? And some of you had very good ideas on how to address this problem. So one idea on how to address this problem is by convincing the government to have a phone number to which citizens can call and say there is a pothole just outside, like on the street next to my home, or at this intersection or this street, right? We can convince the government to create this phone number. And many governments actually allow this. Many governments, want the citizens to report, if the roads are in good condition, right? So that's one idea. And many governments have been doing this, as I said. Here's a completely different idea. I'm going to the second, section on this slide. Interview citizens on the challenges they face in their daily lives and post those interviews on Facebook. It's a great media project. We should be documenting the challenges that the citizens face, right? In Nepal, in India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Sri Lanka. Did I miss any country? Okay. All right. So it's a great idea. I like that project also. Now, if you kind of combine those two ideas, then you have a new idea. So it's really, using smartphones, maybe taking a video and documenting these, potholes and posting it on Facebook or some online media, right? So it's a, you could say it's a new idea, but it really derives, you know, ideas from some other ideas. So that's something to keep in mind. Now you're thinking, okay, why do we care about knowing, okay, this idea actually has two components that are inspired by two previous ideas? That's kind of the point I'm trying to make, right? Actually, it'll become very clear in just a few minutes why it's important. Even if you already had this idea, you did not come up with this idea in this manner. It's really important to know the lineage of idea. And I'll actually kind of convince you, why that is important in just a couple minutes. But before I get there, let me also walk you through an example for the next idea heuristics, which is addressing gap or limitations of an existing idea, right? So what's the problem, we're talking about? I did not see this idea in one of the videos that you submitted. Obviously, I did not watch every single video. My apologies. Maybe some of you are thinking about it, but if you're not, I encourage you to think about this. I've always been frustrated with how long I have to wait in government offices, and this is a pervasive problem around the world, right? I've visited government offices in Nepal. I've visited government offices in the United States, and I've visited some government offices in India, at least let's say the airport facilities in India. So, the lines are unpredictable in government offices, and many of us are frustrated with that, right? Hopefully some of you will come up with some amazing ideas on how to address this. This will really have a big impact, right? For all the citizens. So, one of the solutions to address this problem is, again, ask the government, hey, set up a line. And before I come to this office, let's say to pay my taxes, right? I'm going to call this number and, please let us know how long the line is. I'm going to call you saying, hey, I need to pay taxes this month. I was planning to come there today. How long is the line today? Right? That's a solution. And they tell you, oh, okay, today the line is quite long. It's, there were at least 100 people. So someone at the front desk of that office would tell you. And then you said, okay, I'm not going to go there today. Call them tomorrow and they ask you, okay, you ask them, how many people are in the line? And they'll say, okay, there are only 5 people in the line. Then you actually just run to that office and pay your taxes. So that's a solution. There is a limitation to that. The information may not be up to date, and the office may not answer your call. Right? So that's a potential problem with that solution. And what's an idea? Well, all of us can think about this, right? Oh, an idea could be just okay, that calling the office and getting and asking how long the line is, that's a pretty good approach, but there are some serious limitations there. And maybe we can address that limitation by making things electronics, to some extent, right? So that's the heuristics. That's how we can create an improved version of the idea. Recall, I did not try to come up with a completely new idea. I just said, yeah, the solution, it's the right approach actually, right? Somehow getting in touch with the government office and finding out what's actually happening today, right now, how many people are in the line. That's the approach. The only tweak, the only modification that I made to that idea is, okay, so maybe we can use some modern electronic online technology to further improve that idea, right? Because remember, ultimately, the citizens will not care if you came up with a new idea. The citizens will care and will thank you profusely if you're able to create an idea that works. And that could just be a modification of an existing idea, not necessarily a new idea. Once again, I'm going to reiterate, new ideas are great, they're exciting, but that should not be the focus. The focus should be ideas that work. And finally, just the third heuristic, that I use a lot, And maybe you can use it a lot too, right? If you think it works for you, is changing the setting. And one example of changing the setting is changing the place. There was one video from southern India about how we need to increase the accountability on how disaster funds are being used. So whenever there is a disaster, people out of their kind heart, they send a lot of materials. Many of us make donations. And that's a great thing to do, right? And the government sets up these mechanisms. Governments as well as non-governmental organizations set up mechanisms to be able to receive this type of assistance, so that the assistance can be distributed to the citizens who are impacted by these disasters. And we have disasters every year, every month, all around the world, including in South Asia. So rather than design a new mechanism from scratch, we could just say, hey, there are disasters around the world, and maybe rather than trying to come up with something entirely new, let me just go find out which countries actually were able to put proper accountability in how disaster funds are being used, right? And let me just adapt that to my country. So that's the idea, right? I didn't say, okay, I'm going to come up with a completely new way of doing accountability. I didn't say that. What I said is, I'm not going to create anything new. I'm going to learn how people have improved accountability in disaster funds management. And I'm going to apply that to India. That's all I'm going to do, right? So, and why am I okay with that? Well, ultimately, the citizens don't care if the idea is new. They don't care. The citizens care and will thank you if somehow you're able to increase the accountability in disaster fund use. They're not going to say, wow, you did an amazing job, you brought some new ideas. They're not going to thank you for that necessarily, right? So always think about your goals rather than newness of the ideas. There are other ways, and not recommended ways necessarily, to come up with ideas. I'm kind of wrapping up this section. You can come up with the random ideas, not recommended. I will admit I've done that myself, but not recommended. You don't want to come up with the random ideas, although there is some room for randomness also, and that's the reason I listed it here, right? Uh, you know, for the last 15 minutes or so, basically, I've been discouraging you from doing something new, which is probably a complete contradiction to what you heard earlier today, right? And so you should not believe in everything that I say, because it may contradict everything that you heard earlier today and what you may hear in the future. But yeah, so there is room for some randomness, because sometimes randomness is what creates new ideas, and maybe there are solutions that require new ideas, right? I'm not saying, okay, in the history of humanity, we've created all the ideas that we need, and we're just going to borrow the ideas. That's not what I'm saying, right? So there may still be some room for creating new ideas. So maybe you have to do something random, not inspired by something that is existing. You could also, if you don't have a lot of experience creating and designing projects, you could also look at top trends and lists. You can, we all know how to use Google, and you can say, let's say, best ideas in disaster fund, accountability, right? Or, best ideas on government accountability in general. You can go to Google and search and see, what are the main ideas these days, right? So you could do that. Or sometimes you could also be, you could be informed by, how interesting this particular idea is to you personally, right? Sometimes, Um, and it is excusable sometimes, right? It's excusable to be driven primarily by your interest. It's okay sometimes, not recommended to do that in a significant way, because one of the messages that you hear again and again in the modern world is you need to find what is interesting for you. I disagree. Generally, that's the wrong approach, right? If I'm interested in jumping up and down, I shouldn't be doing that all day or all my life, right? Even though I find it interesting, it doesn't make any sense, right? So I disagree with that you should do what you find interesting. Wrong idea, right? So I'm listing these things saying, okay, these are not you primarily should not be driven by what you see here on this slide, these 3 bullet points, but it's okay to consider them once in a while, because as a human being, I want to do something interesting to myself once in a while. That's why I said it's excusable to do that once in a while. But you should not be primarily driven by what is interesting to you solely. Here's an example of looking at top trends. So this is basically looking at graduate school admission for PhD. And whenever students apply to, let's say, a PhD program, they're supposed to write down what they're interested in. And many of you are interested in technology, and you're going to actually relate to some of the phrases that you see here, right? So this is an example of doing research as to what is trending, right? So, when you apply for a PhD, you actually need to write a page or two saying, okay, I'm interested in doing this research. Very similar to what all of you guys did for being included in this program that we're running for the next several months. So it turns out a lot of students are now interested in doing research in deep learning. This is basically the artificial intelligence technology. And I'm sure every one of you has heard about artificial intelligence technology, and turns out that's what a lot of people want to do. So same idea. In graduate school admission, you can kind of find out what people are studying these days. And in government accountability, you can think about, okay, what are people doing around the world these days? Same approach. All right. So I did say I will let you know in a couple minutes why understanding that lineage of idea is important. It took more than that, my apologies. But here is why, right? If you understand the idea context, what I mean by that is an idea does not exist in isolation. There are many other ideas related to that, right? I gave you some examples. So if you understand some other ideas in that setting, it'll actually help you maybe combine them, modify them, etc., create more interesting ideas, which is wonderful. But it turns out, if you know what other ideas are related to your idea without doing a lot of work, which is, I try to, do as little work as possible to get as much result as possible always. And that is what you should also, right? So if you know what other ideas are related to your idea, you can actually start vetting your idea immediately without even doing a lot of work, which is great, right? So you should ask yourself, okay, here's my idea. I think it's important. Try to find out if there are other ideas that are similar to yours. Try to find out if someone actually has done that before, maybe in the exact city where you're trying to do it, or country, or exact field, right? Government accountability versus let's say education or healthcare, whatever, right? And try to find out what happened to that project. Was it successful, or was it not? See, this is such a powerful approach to really help you work on the right project. Now, to be able to do this without doing any work, you need to know what other ideas are related to your idea, what other projects are related to your project, right? And try to find out if those projects were successful, if those projects, if they created impact, the type of impact that you're looking for. So that is what you should be doing, because your idea, even though, you sat on your computer and you may believe this idea came to your head, on its own. It probably did not, right? It was probably inspired by many, many things that you saw and heard while you're living your life, while you're working. So, any idea that you have, you're excited about, you want to work on, try to find some other ideas and try to see if those ideas were successful. Because if those ideas were successful, that may indicate that your ideas may also be successful. It may also create impact that you're looking for. Um, here's a case study. I love this case study, and I was very saddened. Every time I'm reminded that there's so much pollution, so there's so much garbage, right, in the world, and many of you want to actually work on that, and I thank you for that, because I think that's an important problem, right? So let's say my idea is I'll take videos of garbage or potholes and raise awareness, and I think that's great, right? You should ask yourself, okay, am I the first one in the world to think of this idea? Right? We're the first one in the world to identify, okay, we have a garbage problem. We have a pollution problem in the world. Probably not, right? Probably not. Okay. So has anyone done something similar? And if they have, I'm sure you'll find organizations, you'll find people who've tried to address this problem. So how did that turn out? They probably had a particular idea on how to make some solution for that problem, right? How did it turn out? And very importantly, why would it be different when I do such a project, right? So if you want to take a video of garbage or potholes and raise awareness, has anyone ever done that? That's the first question. Has anyone ever taken a picture of garbage or potholes, posted online and say, hey guys, we need to be aware that there is garbage and potholes in our city? Has anyone ever done that? And if they have, how did that turn out? And if it was successful, that's great. That's a hint that, okay, your idea, your effort will be rewarded with an impact. Now, if it didn't turn out the way you would like it to be turned out, why would it be different? When I do maybe the same project, why would it be different? Right? Something to think about. And you will be able to ask these questions properly if you know what other ideas exist in the world, related or similar. And that's the reason, even if you are dead set on working on an idea that you've already formulated, spend a little bit of time finding out what are the other related initiatives, and why they worked and why they did not work. I think a lot of times we focus on why some projects didn't work, and this is kind of a problem. Around the world, we tend to focus on what didn't work. Maybe human brain is surprisingly effective at finding problems, because when we evolved, we had to solve a lot of problems, right? But let's also spend some time finding out why some of these ideas worked. I think that's really important. And believe me, if you really go with that mindset, you will find a lot of things that have worked in all of our communities. Even though there are lots of problems, believe me, you will find lots of things that are working surprisingly well in all of our communities. And a lot of that is going to be helpful in informing the creation of ideas for your project. So hopefully I convinced you that understanding the context and lineage of ideas, right? It helps you predict the outcomes of your project to some extent, because we want projects that create huge impact in the society. So that's our goal. All right, so I'm gonna move in even more and more specifically into vetting the ideas. Hopefully I shared with you, how people come up with ideas, and why it's important to understand the context in which that idea was created. Even though you already have an idea, understanding the context is really useful. So now I'm going to get into the specifics of how to evaluate ideas. Let's discuss, how I vet some of the ideas and how others do, and some of these ideas may be useful to you. So let's go. Yeah. So how to vet ideas. So that's sort of what I want to talk about next. Why do we want to vet or evaluate ideas? As we all know, that different ideas have different potential. Not everything is the same. Not everything is the same. Right? So if I just stand in one place and jump up and down, that has a very limited impact in the world. I'll maybe get some exercise, and that's pretty much it, right? It doesn't solve the pollution problem if I just jump up and down. So it's really important to evaluate ideas before we work on them, because we want to be successful. All of us, we want to be successful. And we want to also create impact in the world, right? We want to create impact in the world. We don't want to just do things for ourselves. We want to do it, for our neighborhood, for our city, for our country, and for the world. That's why you better think hard before you start working about idea, right? If an idea does not have much promise, don't work on it, because as human beings, we have extremely limited resources. Time being one of them, right? But also money and our network. So we better spend some time thinking about, okay, is this a promising idea, right? And as I said earlier, it should not be primarily driven by what you find interesting. No one cares what you're interested in, by the way. No one does. And what you're interested in is not important. It's not important at all. What's important is that garbage problem is solved. That's probably one of the most boring topics, right? What's important is that, that pollution problem is addressed. What's important is that pothole is fixed. That is what's important. Not what you find interesting. No one cares about what you're interested in. But, they will appreciate your work if that pothole is fixed. They will appreciate that. Okay. So, yeah, don't work on ideas before you vet them properly. Otherwise, you may be, wasting your time. And your time is society's time. It's not your time. You guys are all highly educated, very resourceful. So it's not about you. It's about the society. So that's the reason you cannot squander your resources just because you find them interesting. That's so selfish. That is very selfish. To say that you want to work on something just because you find it interesting. Okay. So work on something that will create an impact in the world. Don't work on something just because you find it interesting. Okay. So, yeah. The other thing that many of us do, those of us who are very motivated, got a chance to, get, education and, happen to have access to some resources, right? I find it very satisfying intellectually sometimes. Oh yeah, here's this very challenging problem. Let me solve it. It'll give me satisfaction, right? If I solve some very challenging problem. Or, I find this problem very exciting. Let me work on it. It's a very exciting problem. But I would argue that these are not the reasons you should be selecting an idea. These are the wrong reasons. Because, hopefully I convinced you that just because an idea is interesting, you should not really work on it. And hopefully you can kind of see my reasoning as to this challenge also, right? Just because you find something challenging does not mean you should work on it. And I'll actually make it even clear just in a few moments. And just because you find something exciting, that's almost the same thing as interesting, right? That you should actually be working in that area. So yeah, so do we really want to do something challenging just because it is challenging? The reason I want to put it there, as I said, is we tend to get very ambitious And we've actually acquired extraordinary skills to solve, very challenging problems. And we find that, intellectually very satisfying. So, yeah, you should really ask yourself that question. Do you really want to do something challenging just because it's challenging? And hopefully, your answer is no. And if it is not a no yet, hopefully by the end of this talk, you'll be convinced that, yeah, I shouldn't work on something just because it's challenging. So I will share with you 3 tools that can help you vet ideas. And tools are just, checklists or some mechanism people have come up with to evaluate ideas. None of these are my ideas. I have no shame in admitting that I didn't come up with these ideas. I simply got inspired by what I've seen and what I've others do, and I've simply adopted some of those ideas because they happen to work for me to some extent, and I believe it'll work for you also. And you can pick one of these tools. That's totally cool, right? You don't have to ask their permission, right? You can just use these tools. And if you don't like these tools, that's totally cool too. You can pick something that works for you. But the point is pick something, okay? All right, so tool number 1, as I said, tool is not some kind of complicated software here, right? It's really just a way of thinking, some framework or some checklist, something like that. So, so here's a tool that I like. You basically think of effort or resource or challenge or something like that along one dimension, and things have low, some projects require low effort, some projects require a lot of effort, and you also have to think about the importance of the project, right? And if you don't have a lot of experience, you'll probably make some mistakes in estimating the effort or resource required, as well as the importance of the project. And sometimes importance can be subjective, totally understandable, but you got to start evaluating your ideas along these dimensions. You should ask yourself, okay, here's this idea that I have. What effort or resource will it require, right? And here's this idea that I have, same idea. What is the importance of this idea? Is it very important? Is it not so important? And as you can imagine, ideas can fall in all kinds of places on this plane, right? Now, not sure if you can see my pointer, but I'm kind of moving my pointer around the area designated as
We can
1.
see.
Oh, okay. Wow. Amazing. Yeah. So,
Cursor, by the way.
yeah. Say that again.
Now, I don't know what you mean by pointer. I could see your cursor.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, perfect.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's just look at some interesting places on this slide, right? So what do you guys think about this area designated as number 2? Is that a great area for our idea to fall on? Hopefully, I mean, you guys are all smart. You guys are probably smiling, saying, okay, yeah, I get it. It's obvious. And I think that's true. You guys get it. You do not want to be here. You do not want to work on something that is very resource intensive, very, effort intensive, but of low importance. Okay. So, basically 2 is bad. 2 is really bad. You don't want to be, in this area designated as 2. So this is an opportunity for yourself to think and ask yourself, okay, I have this idea that I created. I kind of want to work on it, but is it a 2? If it is a 2, you're in trouble. You are in big trouble, because I'm going to give you a hard time because you are squandering societal resources on something that is resource intensive but of low importance. You should not be doing that. Okay. What do you guys think about 4? If you look at it, 4 basically indicates low effort and high importance. Turns out, ideally, I mean, the world is not ideal always, but we should be working on ideas that kind of fall in this area, right? Something where you can create something that is of very high importance, but it does not require a lot of effort. So that's, ideally, this is where you want your ideas to be. That's where you want 4. Keep that in mind. You want 4, not a 2, right? So 3 is also okay, but you have to be very careful about doing something that requires a lot of resource and a lot of effort, and it has high importance. There is no doubt. There is no doubt, right? What's an example of that? Let me just present an example. Let's say, one of the problems that, this is still true in Nepal. It's probably not true in other countries in the region, because in Nepal, especially in the mountains, there are a lot of resource challenges to send textbooks on time to public schools, right? So a lot of the textbooks are printed in Kathmandu or other big cities, and they have to ship the textbooks to the mountains of Nepal, the public schools there, and the textbooks do not necessarily arrive there on time, right? And textbooks are important. Textbooks are very important, okay? So what would be a very, resource intensive way to solve that problem? Well, it may be a solution that says, well, we're going to give, laptops to every single student in the mountains of Nepal. And obviously, the cellular data coverage is also not very good in those places, right? Well, not a problem. We're going to build cell towers, or we're going to give them satellite internet. Well, a lot of those places also don't have very reliable electricity, if at all. And you say, okay, no problem. We'll give them, lots of solar panels, or we'll build some power plants also. See how resource intensive that approach is? It's a really important problem. There is no doubt. There is no doubt it's an important problem. The problem is the students don't have textbooks. But you created a solution that is extraordinarily resource intensive, effort intensive. So the possibility of you acquiring all of those resources to solve that very important problem is close to 0. It's close to 0, right? So I'm just giving an example. So whenever, you have an idea and say, okay, I want to work on it, think of this matrix here that I presented to you. And ideally, you want to be in this area over here where, you're working on really important problems and something that does not require a lot of effort or resource, because I don't know about you, but I am resource limited. I have limited time. I have limited money. I have limited number of people I can ask for help. And I bet that's true for almost everyone, right? We are resource constrained, especially time. We do not have unlimited time. So I think this is a matrix that's very helpful. Let's look at tool number 2. It's a set of questions, and some of these questions have come from how to think about research topics for PhD students. But I've kind of tweaked some of these questions, did some edits, and it turns out they're very relevant for us, right? You need to really ask yourself, will anybody care? Will anybody care? That's really important, because you want to solve problem for lots of people, not just for you, and solvable within a given amount of time. In this program, I think everyone knows how long you have, right? You just have a few months to come up with some amazing ideas, and a lot of us will not be able to solve that problem in that given period of time, right? So that's something to ask yourself. Okay, do I really think I can solve this problem in the amount of time I have? So the third one is not so important. For PhD students, it is somewhat more important, But even for them, that cannot really be the most important thing, right? And certainly not in the real world. Will I be the first to answer this question? Will I be the first to introduce this idea? Will I be the first one to demonstrate that this new idea works? Remember, there's still some room for new ideas in the world, right? We should not say, okay, all the ideas that we need as human beings, they've already been created. We shouldn't say that. And I don't think that's true. So there's still some room for new ideas. It's just the first demonstration of this new idea. And if it turns out this new idea is going to solve some big problems in the world, that's a good contribution you'll be making, right? And do I have good tools to address this question? That turns out that's really important. Remember, everything is going to require resources. Do I really have all the tools to address this question? That's something to keep in mind. And this is there's like a very interesting way to think about this. Do I have good tools to address this question? You should ask if you will be successful in that project. And, a lot of us, as I said, we're fortunate to go to schools, get some education. We're fortunate to have some resources, including, mental resources. Right? I think many of you are very smart. But if you say to yourself that, okay, I'll be successful because I'm smarter than others, or I'm very smart, that's probably, not a good answer. And one reason why that's not a good answer is you're not being very specific. Smart is like a very general concept. Okay, you can maybe multiply two numbers really fast. Some people may call that smart, right? Or you can read some text really fast. Some people can read text really fast, and I'm sure you have some of your friends who can do that. Some people can remember a lot of things. That's another example, of what we call being smart, right? But you should really ask yourself, okay, will I be able to solve this garbage problem just because I have a great memory? Probably not. Probably not, right? Will I be able to solve this pollution problem because I can read stuff really fast? Probably not. So just don't get carried away by the fact that, okay, I'm smart, I think I'll be successful. You have to be specific. You need to say, okay, well, solving this particular problem requires reading a lot of things really fast. And I know, and I have the skill to read, something really fast. That's why I'll be successful. That's a little bit better. But just by saying, okay, I'm smart, so I'll be successful, it's not a good enough answer. Because I'm a hard worker. We can even going back to tool number one. Just because something that requires a lot of effort is that, really a good indicator of success? Probably not. You probably have to work smart, not necessarily work hard to be successful, right? So I think we need to work to a certain extent, right? If I don't do anything, I probably will not be successful at all, right? But working hard cannot be the goal. That's not the goal. It's just like what I said earlier. Working on something that's interesting to you, that cannot be the goal. Working hard cannot be the goal. That's not your goal. In fact, that would be squandering your resources. You have limited mental energy, and if you just work hard on something that's not important, what a waste. We don't want that. I don't want that for you, right? And what I really like is, the third, point here on this slide, because I have a secret weapon. Many ideas, perhaps they were not successful because they were lacking something that I have. And that is, what we can call a secret weapon, right? A lot of people have tried to solve this garbage problem. It's a real problem. But if you can identify, okay, why is it that they have not been successful? And turns out I have what they did not have. And because of what I have, I will be able to solve that problem. So that's your secret weapon. That's your secret weapon, right? So first of all, we should not start by saying, well, no one has tried to solve the garbage problem. Not true. A lot of us, wanted to solve that garbage problem, including me, but I was very unsuccessful in solving that problem, right? All of us have tried to do that probably at home, in our neighborhood, in our cities, in our country. But maybe you have something that people did not have before. Maybe you have a secret weapon to solve this problem. And if there is, that's great. You need to identify that and fully leverage that, right? And a secret weapon can come in many forms. It could be just your innate skill, right? That could be it. Or it could be resources that you have access to people did not, just because the times have evolved, right? Maybe when people tried to solve the garbage problem in the past, they didn't have smartphones, and now you do. Maybe that's your secret weapon. But you really have to think about it rigorously. Okay? Is it just like, just a ordinary weapon that everyone is using unsuccessfully? Or is it a secret weapon that has never been tried, but you believe it's a secret weapon that will be phenomenally effective in solving this problem, right? So that's what you want to think about. So maybe you have access to people, all kinds of resources, platforms, network. Sometimes your network could also be a secret weapon. And sometimes it could be things that you do in life, things that you know, where you live, where you were born, any of that could be a secret weapon. Something to keep in mind. So yeah, let's not start with the premise that, okay, no one has tried to solve this problem, right? They probably have. Maybe they didn't have the secret weapon, and maybe you do, in which case it's worth trying it out. So third tool is, so these are basically a set of questions that people ask when they're evaluating research proposals, but it's still kind of useful in our context, in our projects, and I've kind of tried to highlight some of these questions. So basically, first, I really like this question that you're supposed to answer, right, about your project. And I give you an example from some of the things that you talked about in your videos, right? So you should really ask yourself, what is it that you're trying to do? Is your goal to upload videos of potholes? Is that your goal? Well, I mean, you guys are all smart to know that, okay, that's not your goal, right? That's clearly not your goal. Your goal is not to upload videos of potholes. That's not it. Your goal is really to get the potholes fixed. That's your goal. Keep that in mind. Keep that in mind when you design your project. And don't make the assumption that uploading videos of potholes will magically fix the potholes. It will not. I will guarantee that. Uploading videos of potholes will not magically fix the potholes, right? So if you really ask that question, right, what is it that you're trying to do? That'll actually help you, understand, okay, maybe your goal was not in the right place. Here's another question. What's new in your approach and why do you think it'll be successful? It's almost similar to the secret weapon idea that we talked about earlier, right? Will the ability to upload pictures of potholes online fix the potholes? The answer is probably not. Hopefully that's the conclusion that you will come up with also. But my conclusion is, the answer is probably not. And you should really ask yourself, okay, why are the potholes not getting fixed? If that's your goal, you need to first find out why are they not getting fixed. It's not because of lack of people, trying to fix the potholes. It's not that. A lot of government agencies and non-government agencies and entities, they're trying to solve the pothole problems, right? They're trying to fix the potholes. So ask yourself, okay, what's new in your approach and why do you think it'll be successful? I would also kind of flip that around and say, okay, what's old in your approach And has that old idea worked successfully? Then that's okay too. That's totally fine. And there are some other questions that may be of interest to varying level, and some of these questions and ideas that we heard about in one form or another in the last hour or so, but just walking through them quickly, just try to understand what you're trying to do. How is it done today? What are the limits of current practice? What's new in your approach? We talked about in the previous slide. Who cares? Hopefully you can find someone there. My parents care about what I do, right? But that's not enough. We do want to make our parents happy, and it's great that they care about what we do, but we want to do something that the whole world cares about, or at least my community, my neighborhood, my city, right? So typically work on problem that will have a large impact. So ask yourself, who cares? If you're successful, what difference will it make? Really important to think about, right? And what are the risks and payoffs? Understanding the risk is really important. We are all resourceful, but we fail. I fail almost all the time in any new initiatives, and that's just the nature of initiatives, right? If you try to do 10 things, maybe you fail in 9 things, and maybe you can be successful in one thing, right? That's just the nature of things. So understand the risks, and then why might you be successful, and also why might it not work? How much will it cost? I think a lot of you have not thought about it, because that's my sense. Looking at your video, those are mostly basically your initial idea. I understand that, but most of you have not thought about what is the cost. There can be just amazing ideas, amazing projects, but we really need to think about what is the cost. Cost can come in terms of time, money, other types of resources, and how long will it take? And finally, how will you know you're on the right track? When you're working on a project, let's say I create a 1-year project, right? Do I have to wait for the entire year for me to know if I'm on the right track? Or is there some kind of midterm check I can perform, let's say 3 months and 6 months in, to know if I'm on the right track? All right. So here's sort of the meta comment I have on this second section of the talk, and we've kind of gone a little bit more than 1 hour, so we should also be wrapping up soon. So I've looked at quite a few of your videos, not all, my apologies, but I've looked at quite a few. And here's one observation that I want to make, and the reason I'm making this observation is to encourage you to use some of the tools that I presented today, or some tools you can find online. If you don't like my tools, that's okay, no offense taken. You can find a tool that you like, right? So many of the projects that you're creating, they improve access to information. I love that idea. I like that idea. But one suggestion that I want to make is, the success should not necessarily be just access to information, but it's really the impact that you create after that information becomes accessible. And here's another suggestion I want to make. Don't always leave it to others to create impact from the information that you create, because you actually need to provide examples on how the information that you're creating can impact the world, right? So don't always leave it to others. Of course, it's not just your responsibility to use that information, but because you've created that information. For example, you're gonna create this project that will take videos of potholes, or many of you are documenting a lot of the pollution and garbage and stuff like that, right? Or some healthcare problems that you talked about in some of your projects, or government accountability problems that you talked about, right? So you're going to be creating lots of information, and it's really useful information, but also spend a little bit of time thinking about how that information can be used to create an impact. But don't be lazy, because some of you might be a little bit lazy here and say, okay, I'm going to upload it, and I'm going to show basically how corrupt the government is. and magically it will get rid of corruption in the government. That's not true. We know this. We've had smartphones in the world for decades now, at least 1 decade, right? Governments are still struggling to reduce corruption, right? So there's a lot more information, but there's probably still some creative thinking on how to use that information to reduce corruption in the government around the world. And whenever you create information, like, you have a lot of interesting projects, you should also think about making it easier to create impact based on the information that your project will create, right? That's really important. Okay, so I just want to spend maybe a couple minutes thinking about skills, and we have to wrap up after that. So, but we've covered so far generating ideas. I shared some things about that, vetting ideas, and skills. That's just, I was not supposed to talk about it, but I'm going to use this time to also talk about just some of my thoughts on skills, right? Okay, so, your project is going to go through various stages. And as part of this program, most likely you would be doing design and pilot, not scaling. And depending on the stage of the project, you will actually need different types of skills. And you should really ask yourself, okay, what skills will I need for my project? What skills do I need? I have some I've some project that will create a lot of impacts. I really want to work on it. And what skill do I need? And skills come in different forms, different types, right? The technical skills, because a lot of you plan to use digital technology, smartphones, computers, data analytics, sensors, right? You will need technical skills, but do not overlook other skills. If you come from technical area, do not overlook other skills. And the reason I emphasize this is many of us come from technical areas. A lot of us are tech savvy. And sometimes we have the arrogance to think that technology skills is all I need to solve these very pressing problems in the world. Not true. You will need a lot of soft skills. For example, how to communicate your idea, right? That's an example of a soft skill. You would need business skills because, hey, you probably need to be able to raise money to take your idea to the world, right? And how to sustain your effort over long periods of time, fundraising or by selling your service, whatever it is. Hey, that's going to require some business skills. And you'll also need some leadership skill because you probably need to be working in a team, managing a team. So technical skills are really important, especially in the context of the current program, but that is not enough. You would need soft skills, business skills, and leadership skills. And here's an example of skills that may be relevant for your projects, right? Digital documentation, a lot of you would need that. There are a lot of new interesting technologies, very powerful technologies related to that. Data analysis, software. And when you're creating a project, you also need probably know how to narrate a project, let's say in voice or in video, how to interact with people, how to interact with the government, fundraising, etc. Lots of relevant skills. But you really should not try to learn everything because let's face it, you will not be good at everything. You'll be good at a few things, and that's great, right? And you'll be, kind of mediocre at a few other things, and you'll be really bad at the rest of the things. So don't try to learn everything, okay? Even though your project is going to require many areas of expertise, please don't try to learn everything. Learning is great, but learning everything is not so great. Because we're not in high school anymore. Most of us are not, right? So you should really recruit people to your team to fill the skill gap. That's sort of what I want to do. And this is kind of the last topic in terms of skills that I want to mention. Being able to prioritize is really important. We talked about that a little bit when we said we need to vet the ideas, right? That's also about prioritizing. But prioritizing is really important as an individual, because you have limited time. As an organization, limited time again. As a country, limited time. We don't want to wait for 50 years to live in a very healthy and prosperous society. At least I don't have 50 years. Maybe some of you do. I don't. Okay, so Yeah, so prioritizing is really important, and the question is, okay, now how do we learn to prioritize? um, so here's one way. We talked about a few ways, but here's one interesting way. So basically say, this is a code that says, I have two kinds of problems: the urgent and the important. The urgent are not important, and the important are never urgent. It's kind of an interesting way to think about it, right? We can kind of convert this to a matrix, and some people call it Eisenhower matrix. It's the same kind of stuff. Maybe some things are less urgent, more urgent, not so important, and very important. And you can kind of create a matrix. And what's a good number here? I'll let you just look at it for a moment, just to see if this kind of tool can help you prioritize things in your life and in work. Obviously here the 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 numbers that are optimal are different. It's not always 4, right? So what are the things you want to work on first? Okay, something that's really urgent and of high importance, right? That's what you want to work on first. How about 1? Do you want to be doing 1? Right? But if we're not careful, if we're not thinking rigorously and carefully about our ideas, accidentally we may be working on ideas that fall in this area, and we'll be so sad when we realize that. We'll be so sad when we realize that, right? So let's find out what is important. Let's find out what is urgent. And once we do that, that will help us prioritize a little bit. And, we're not going to be good at this, on day one. But if we bring this type of thinking when we plan our time, when we plan our life, we'll get better every day. That's sort of the point. Okay, so here are the key points from what we covered today. So when you create idea, try to understand how it is related to something else you have seen, because that provides a context in which we can start to maybe even proactively evaluate without doing any work. What is the likelihood of success? That's great. And before you start working on your idea, spend a little bit of time evaluating that idea. And it really doesn't matter what tool you use. Everyone's going to say my tool is best, right? But maybe all the tools are good, or maybe they're good to some extent. It really doesn't matter, but use something. Don't try to do intuitive evaluation technique. It's not that great. And don't try to become an expert in everything. Those of you who come from technical areas, it's a good idea to get a sense for what other skills are. But if you identify, okay, I'm not really good at something, you should really try to leverage your network. And if you come from non-technical area, it's good to get some understanding of the technical skills, right? But if you really think, okay, it's not really your thing, then you don't really have to be an expert in that. You can leverage your network to bring that expertise to your project. There is no glory to learning everything. What is important is the impact that you create in the world.